Okay, so we left off our last segment by looking at the upcoming research, and you know that we're going to be looking at behavior modification therapies. One of the coolest things that's come from the behavioral approach is some very cool therapies. We're going to look at the special case of binging. We're going to look at infant bonding and how that plays out in adult relationships. We're going to look at something called androgyny and more. So here we go on this journey. We're starting out here with behavior modification therapies. And notice that on this slide, we've got two of them that operate through operant conditioning. And we have two more that you're going to learn about that operate through classical conditioning. And then there's still yet another two you're going to learn about that operate through observational learning. Okay. In this first one, changing contingencies is usually used to get rid of a negative behavior. Okay? The therapist's job here is to very carefully question the client and study the possible ways that the client might be reinforcing the negative behavior without realizing it. So it's not unusual, for instance, for a teacher to be trying to punish a child for acting out, but actually giving them a lot of attention while they're at it. And, you know, for children who are really starved for attention, that can be a much more powerful reinforcement than the punishment ever, the power the punishment would ever amount to be. So it's exactly what it sounds like here, changing contingencies. So therapists use this when they find that the client is unintentionally, giving a certain contingency to a behavior and then helping them to change it. So in the case of our child in the classroom, they would probably advise the teacher to take that child quietly outside and talk to them quietly in the hallway instead of in front of the other children. This next one, token economy, is another one through operant conditioning, which remember is learning through what? Operant conditioning is learning through reinforcement and punishment. Token economies are usually used to encourage positive behaviors. Okay, so most often used to encourage positive behaviors, and they're most often used in live-in environments. So I have a friend, for instance, who he's the director of a home for intellectually challenged men. Hey, and they have 12 residents, and they have a strong token economy system in that works very well. And what a token economy is you assess the level of each of your clients, okay? And you want to take them to the next step, some positive behavior they're not performing yet. And with these men, for instance, it might be grooming themselves. With some of them, might be getting dressed and grooming themselves, all by themselves. Or with others, it might be something more advanced, like taking on a chore. They've known how to do that, and they've done that for a long time, but they're actually capable of participating in some chores around the house. And the idea here is when they perform the positive behavior, they earn either a token or a point, something that is a token of what you would consider to be money, like in our economy. But in their economy, they can save up these tokens or points for something very cool that they want. One of the interesting jobs of the therapist, besides assessing each client's level and what behaviors they should try to encourage next, another really creative part of the job is coming up with things that they can buy with their points or tokens that are of value to all of them. So they might have to add something on the list because there's a client who's not responding to any of the reinforcements. They're really not very reinforcing for that client, but they can come up with a special idea. So, and things, it can be like a chance to go to a movie on the weekend. So everybody who's earned enough points gets to hop on the shuttle and go see a movie, or it might be going swimming in the community pool. Same thing. Those who've earned enough points can hop on the shuttle and go once a week, that kind of thing. Okay, token economies. So both of these are through operant conditioning. Okay, now through classical conditioning, we've got systematic desensitization. And some of you have heard about this before, but in live classrooms, when I ask what is the very first step in systematic desensitization, what is the first thing the therapist must do? Most students get this wrong, even when they've had it before. And it's really very, very important. Okay? It won't work without this first step. And so the first step is, well, first off, I want to tell you that systematic desensitization is most often used for what purpose? So people who've learned about this before usually remember this, and that is for phobias. Phobias are irrational fears. So if the client has an irrational fear that's messing with an opportunity in their life, okay? Let's say it's preventing them from flying. And if they could fly, they could be up for promotions at work and such. Okay, so systematic desensitization is usually used to encourage a positive behavior that's blocked by a phobia. So it's usually used to encourage a positive behavior that's blocked by a phobia. Okay, now the first thing that the client has to do, somebody give me a drum roll, yeah, and it is teach the client a relaxation technique. Okay, oftentimes the one that's used is a breathing exercise. Okay, but sometimes they're different, and this works the very best if you've got biofeedback. So you're hooked up to machines, and as you use, for instance, your breathing exercise to get things like your blood pressure and your galvanic skin response and such down. You can actually, with biofeedback, see them coming down before you feel it. So it's very rewarding, right? But it works really well with biofeedback. But it's necessary either way. And so the very first thing that the therapist must do is understand that when these clients have a full-fledged phobia, it is so, their irrational fear is so extreme that just thinking about what it is they're afraid of gives them all kinds of sympathetic nervous system arousal. All of those signs of arousal. They're shaking, trembling, they're sweating, their blood pressure is way up, and they can feel their heart pounding, just thinking about the fear object. So here's the deal. The therapist first teaches them this relaxation technique, and then they get them just to think about the fear object while practicing their technique until there is no more sympathetic nervous system activity. So they can now think about it without experiencing that, because if they feel it coming on, they just start their breathing exercise again, right? And then once the therapist feels confident in that, okay, that is ingrained, then they'll move to the next step. And the next step might be, for instance, just sitting in a flight simulator, right? Just sitting in it is going to arouse all kinds of sympathetic nervous system activity on the part of the client. But what is the therapist going to have them do at the same time? At the same time, they're going to have them do their breathing exercises. And this may take 2 or 3 sessions, or it may happen on the first one, but eventually they're going to get it under control, right? And then you're ready for the next step, and the next step, and the next step. all the way until you as a therapist are hopping on the plane with them. Yes, you want to go with them. A lot of therapists actually use Southwest Airlines for this because, anybody guess? Because Southwest Airlines is the only airline where you can, if you miss the flight, hey, you can bank your money and you can take that flight later. And of course, that client may decide they're not quite ready once they are near the door of the plane. Okay, so if you think about it, this one is kind of like baby steps, right? It's a good way to think of it. But it's using classical conditioning, and that's why that first step is so very important, right? They never get to the second, third, fourth, certainly never get to the last one without that first step, and of teaching them a relaxation technique. Okay, so what they are learning to do is they're learning to associate the fear object with relaxation, starting with the tiniest piece of it. In other words, just thinking about it. So it's learning through trigger association, right? So there we go. Aversion therapy, interesting one. And this one is usually used to get rid of a negative behavior. And an example would be, there are medications that induce vomiting. Okay, nausea, and if there's anything in your system, very uncomfortable nausea, and if there's anything in your system, vomiting. In fact, sometimes people, even if they don't have anything in their system, will have dry heaves. But regardless, it's very, very unpleasant. Okay, so someone might be trying to quit smoking, and one possible therapy is aversion therapy, where they take these medications, the therapist gives them these medications, and then has them smoke. Okay, well, they're so terribly uncomfortable with this nausea, and they do that over and over again until the client doesn't want to even be near cigarettes. Okay, can anybody think of a movie that used aversion therapy? Can anybody think of a movie? There's one that probably not many of you have seen, but it's a really good one for this, and it's a great psychology movie, although it is freaky, right? So don't watch it if you are easily disturbed. It's very disturbing, very freaky, but it's called Clockwork Orange, and there's a great example in there of aversion therapy. And sometimes people say, well, how effective is aversion therapy? Because these others are really effective, right? This one is less so. The problem with this is that they're very strong effects, okay? So it's very effective until what? What do you think? Until it kind of wears off. So, the therapist stops having you take the medications and then smoke. And over time, kind of the memory of that can wear off. And then you start craving a cigarette again. So that can happen, right? By the way, this is my very favorite picture of aversion therapy. All right, now we're going to look at a couple of therapies through observational learning. Remember that where operant conditioning was learning through what? Reinforcement and punishment. Classical conditioning through what? Okay, through trigger association. And this one, observational learning, is through modeling. Okay, so seeing a behavior model, that learning it vicariously that way. And a couple of things here through modeling. First one is social skills training. So social skills can be modeled by the therapist. Sometimes we think, oh, if somebody has good social skills, they're born with it. And if somebody doesn't, they weren't born with it, there's nothing that can be done. Well, if someone is born with really, and it shows very poor social skills, that's something that we usually learn. That's something, most social skills are picked up and learned in our lifetime. So this is something that, you can improve by training, okay? And so the therapist models good social skills, and then they have the client role play, okay? So they might ask the client for, by the way, this is an example, okay? They might have a client in the office who is frozen, really wants to meet women, but is just frozen around women. It doesn't know how to ask out a woman. And the therapist might ask that client, what, if you had the guts, what would you say, right? What would you say to her? And the client might say, and the therapist would be, well, pretend I'm her. What would you say? Just tell me. And the client might say, by the way, I don't suppose you'd want to go out on Saturday night with me. And the therapist, is going to come back and say, if I were the woman, I might feel a bit offended because when you say, by the way, it makes it sound like you don't think this is very important, right? And the way that you phrase this is kind of negative. It suggests to her that she really doesn't want to. How does this sound? What if you said something like this? There's a movie at Valley Arts Saturday night I'd like to see. If you're free that night, I would really like to take you. Okay? And the client might say, wow, that sounds good. And just having an idea of what to say and how to say it might help. Now, you might have noticed that when I gave the example, the client responding, I was kind of stuttering on purpose, right? That is something that a therapist would not mention because that is brought about by being unsure. Okay, teaching them the skills should also help that because they're going to feel more confident in what they're saying. But to actually point it out to them could make that worse, right? All right. But anyway, you get the idea of social skills training here. Now, this last one, self-efficacy therapy, is so important that we're actually going to give it its own slide. We are going to talk about who invented this form of therapy. And I'll bet you can guess who came up with self-efficacy, right? That was Bandura. All right. So self-efficacy therapy, Bandura. Do you remember what that meant, self-efficacy? It meant how well you think you're going to do at something. Now, self-efficacy therapy is usually used to prompt a positive behavior, to encourage a positive behavior, okay? And in this case, I want you to imagine, let's say, a widowed woman, okay, whose husband always did all the driving, and her husband has died, okay? Not only is she now grieving with the death of her very best friend and spouse, through so many years of life. But she has lost her freedom. She has lost her autonomy. She has lost her mobility. In fact, when you find yourself in this situation, you can't get around without being a nuisance. In other words, having to ask somebody else to disrupt their schedule and to bring you, drive over and pick you up and bring you somewhere and drive over and bring you back. And, what can often happen with elderly people who can't drive, who depended on their spouses for that after their spouse dies, is that they'll stop going anywhere. They'll go deeper and deeper into depression. Okay, until it's too late and they can't be pulled back out, or sometimes they'll even take their own life. So I want you to imagine this widow, and I want you to imagine that she goes to Bandura because he really specializes in things like this. Okay, and his therapy consists of 3 different things, and even though they have to be listed in a certain order on this slide, do be aware that they tend to happen concurrently. So all 3 of them are going on at once. Okay, and the first one is guided mastery. This is like the meat and potatoes of this meal. And the other 2 are like side dishes that will help, that go along with it. Okay, but guided mastery is the central kind of therapy here, the really most helpful part of it. And here's the deal. What he would likely do is he would sit there in his office, and after all, after she explained everything to him, he would say to her, I have an idea. I'm just wondering how you feel you would do at this. What about if we hold our next session in my car, but you will be sitting in the passenger seat and we won't even be moving? Do you think you could handle that? Now, do you think that she might feel like he's kind of patronizing her at this point? Yeah, she might be like, well, yeah, of course I could handle that. Come on, And that's exactly what he wants to hear. And he says, okay, that's what we're going to plan for next time. Okay? So we won't go anywhere. We won't even start up the car, but you're going to sit in the passenger seat. And of course she's comfortable with that, right? She's been there before. She used to ride around with her husband all the time. And they do hold the next therapy session there, right? And he gets her to talk more and more, and he learns about family members, because that's going to be really interesting to him. Family members and friends, and how they feel, for instance, about her doing this. It's really going to come in handy when we talk about verbal persuasion, okay? But at the end of the session, he says to her, now I'm wondering how you would do it something else. What if we did this next time, but you sit in the driver's seat? And again, we never turn the car on. But I really don't want to take this to where it's going to freak you out. Can you handle that? And the idea is for her to roll her eyes, right? And to go, well, yeah, of course I can. Just sit there, All right, so that's what they do the next time, right? And he finishes his learning process, and he's also given her some suggestions that we're going to talk about under vicarious learning during this. But at the end of that session, he says to her, okay, I have a question for you. What about if our next session, we don't turn the car on at all? You're in the driver's seat, but I show you some of the controls that you can do without turning the car on, like turning the lights on and off, and pressing on the brake or pressing on the gas pedal and such. And she's like, you mean we don't even turn the car on? No. He says, but I don't want to take this too far. How well do you think you would handle that? How well would you do with that? And she goes, oh, I'd be fine. Now I want you to think about this. Every time he said to her, how well would you do with this? What is he asking her to assess? He's asking her to assess her self-efficacy for that step, right? And he's not going to start it until she has high self-efficacy. Okay? Pretty clever, huh? Pretty clever. So, and you can see how this builds up. So the next time, once she's learned, and that might take a few sessions, but she's learned everything she can learn without turning the car on. And she even knows things like, he's put her in scenarios like, just pretend we're driving. All right, and you need to stop. There's a stop sign up there, so what are you going to do? And she hits the brake, right, and slowly presses down the brake. All right, great. And now you're driving along, and guess what? It just started sprinkling. What are you going to do? She reaches right over and turns the windshield wipers on. But he sees that all of these, everything that she can practice before they actually turn the car on, steering, everything, right? She's right there. She's got it now. She's right on top of it. Okay? She reacts right away. She knows what to do. And that's when he asks her, okay, now I have an idea. What if we simply turn the car on, but we leave it in park? And we run through this. And then the next time, okay, once she's comfortable with that, he says to her, how do you think you would do if we went in the middle of a parking lot, great big empty parking lot? Okay, and then you got in the driver's seat. And we turn the car on, but you can go as slow as you want just to practice what you've learned. And by that time, she's starting to get the itch. She's starting to taste the freedom because she can see light at the end of the tunnel, right? And odds are she's going to be pretty anxious to try that. But these other things are important too. So vicarious learning. This is, remember, Bandura's emphasis on observational learning. So he is going to want her to see elderly people driving successfully. So one of the sessions, he might ask her permission ahead of time and then take her or meet her instead at a senior center right when some event is letting out. And she can watch, many of the seniors get out and hop in cars and drive off. Okay, very good for her to see that. The other thing you might do is to have her watch a movie, give her homework, have her watch a movie where there's an elderly person who drives well in the movie. I think this picture right here is actually from Driving Miss Daisy, one such movie, this gentleman driving. And then this last one, verbal persuasion. Hey, it is important for the therapist to figure out who in her life is supportive of her learning to drive and who is not. And some of her kids might be, and some of them may not. And some of her friends might be, and some of them may not. Okay? And the idea here is that the therapist is not going to have her disown family or disown friends because they're not supportive, but he's really going to encourage her just during the time that she's mastering this. Okay? After she's mastered it, doesn't matter anymore. Okay? But up until that time, he's going to encourage her to spend most of her time, as much as she can, with people who are really supportive and excited about her learning this, and to spend less time with those who are not. Make sense? It's a beautiful, beautiful therapy.